Dear friends, I welcome you to our Bible study online. The second thing we are going to look at is the role of love in worship. Although Jesus did not specifically talk about love in John chapter 4, verse 22, the truth is that love is already implied in the understanding of knowing God. Remember the definition of yada. We talked about deep, intimate, loving, covenantal relationship with God. So knowing God already involves loving Him. To know Him is to love Him. Worship should flow from the place of love. It is not because somebody is forcing me to do something. No. Worship should flow from the place of love. It is an extreme form of love. I'm so much in love with this being, so I show it in worship. True worship is the result of a deep affection for God. But then, it does not mean that if I have affection for any other person, then I worship. Yes, I can honor the person, but worship is meant for God alone. The point here is that as I come to understand the immensity of God's love for me in spite of my unworthiness, the fact that I owe everything, my life and my all to Him, and especially when I come to understand what He did for me on the cross by allowing His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, to die for my salvation, my response to Him is worship. And not just worship, worship from the heart, which expresses itself in adoration, reverence, obedience, thanksgiving, love, and the desire to surrender all to Him. The third thing we'll be looking at is worship in spirit. Jesus goes on to tell the woman in John chapter 4, verse 23, that God is spirit, and He desires worship in spirit and truth. Now, what does it mean to worship God in spirit? First and foremost, you notice that the word spirit here is written with small letter S. And so it does not refer to God's Spirit or the Holy Spirit, but to the spirit of man, that is, man's heart. In the Bible, the heart refers to the spirit, which is the deepest part of man, the place where communion between God and man takes place. True worship flows from the heart or from the spirit of man. Although God sees our gestures and hears our voices when we are at worship, He is first and foremost interested in our spirit. He is first and foremost interested in what our hearts feel for Him, in what our hearts are saying to Him. So that means even when we are singing or we are praying, God listens first and foremost to what the heart is saying. As we know from experience, a man can tell a woman he loves her and would want to marry her, when in fact deep down his heart he does not love her and only desires to use her. Similarly, a person can be singing the praises of his boss or even prostrate before him every time he sees him and still do not love his boss. Even though his boss may be fooled by that, the truth remains that his so-called reverence and praises are false because they do not come from the heart. The same thing can happen in worship. We can sing, we can pray, yet our hearts may be far from God. Worship is always an attitude of the heart. External expression is different from the inner essence of worship. A person can go through outward motions of raising his hands, of singing the praises of God, of bowing down, or prostrating himself in the presence of God without actually worshiping. A very good example is the usual raising of our hands when we sing the I surrender all to Jesus, as a sign of our total surrender of everything, of our lives and everything to Jesus. But the truth is that many people raise their hands and sing the song, when in fact deep down them, they know they are not surrendering anything to him, or they are only ready to surrender only a little, but not all. In worship, God is interested in our hearts or spirit. He desires worship from the heart. In the real sense, there is no worship if the heart is not involved. I repeat, there is no worship if the heart is not involved. When the mind is not there and the heart is not involved, it becomes simple noise. All true worship is in essence of the heart. If it is all external and nothing is happening in the heart for God, we feel nothing for him in our hearts, then it is not worship at all, and such will never be able to transform us. This is the reason Jesus himself maintains in Matthew chapter 15 verses 8 and 9 that the worship of those who honor him with their lips while their hearts are far from him is false. We have to be spirit or heart worshippers. On the basis of what we have said about worship being a thing of the heart or spirit primarily, we need to ask ourselves some critical questions. Is our focus during worship more on the spiritual or the physical, or even our emotions? For example, are songs more spiritual or musical? Are songs and gestures more spiritual or emotional? Oftentimes do we, especially the choristers in our churches, not focus more on musical ability and the beauty of the melody to our ears and emotions, rather than the spiritual strength of our singing and its impact on our hearts or spirits, which is really what can change us in worship? Our songs should be first and foremost songs of the heart, not of the lips or the head. Our rendition of hymns should be such that has a measure of eternity, not temporal satisfaction. They should be things that connect us to God and heaven, things that connect us to God and eternity, not just things that connect us to just here and now. Our songs should be songs from grateful and surrendered hearts. Heart songs are more impactful. Songs from surrendered hearts move God. And that is the reason we're emphasizing that our worship, our songs must be heart worship, heart songs. The only way this can happen is if we have intimacy with God. If we have intimacy with God. Because when we have intimacy with God and we are coming to God in worship from that position of intimacy, what happens is that everything we do is original and everything we do becomes impactful. It touches God, and in turn, God impacts on us in his own way. Here, maybe I should share a story with you. The story of a musician, a great musician, known for singing, "The Lord is my shepherd." Everywhere he performed that song, people would rise, that is, give him a standing ovation. And that became his normal experience. One day, at a particular place, a young man walked up to him and said to him, "Sir, I've watched you do this song again and again. Would you allow me to do it today? This great performer was surprised. And somehow he told him, okay, you can do it. So he sat down and this young boy or man took the song. When he finished singing, there was silence in the hall. Then people started weeping. The great performer himself was surprised. And he went to the boy and asked him what really happened. And the boy said to him, you sing about the good shepherd, but I know the good shepherd. And the lesson here is huge. Worship is not just about an intellectual exercise. It's not just about emotions. It is a thing of the heart. And for it to be a thing of the heart, we should have a level of intimacy with the God we worship. When we know him from experience and we enjoy this intimacy with him, then when we speak from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for joining us today. I hope to see you next time.